A very good evening to you. Welcome to this evening's episode of The Watchdog. Tonight on the show, we continue with the series we began yesterday, taking stock of the promises President Cyril Ramaphosa made about 6 months ago during his State of the Nation address. With another 6 months to go or so before he makes more promises, we are looking at the progress his administration may have made at the halfway mark of its political year. From the President's address on the 11th of February, here's what inspired tonight's focus.
Last year, we undertook to create a larger market for small business and designate 1,000 locally produced products that must be procured from small, medium enterprises. As the COVID-19 pandemic forced the closure of global value chains, we have been able to speed up the initiative as the local supply chains become more open for locally manufactured products. To this end, Cabinet approved the Small Medium Enterprise Focused Localization Policy Framework, which identified 1,000 products. Furthermore, the Department of Small Business Development and Trade and Industry and Competition are supporting small and medium enterprises to access larger domestic and international markets.
Welcome back. This is The Watchdog, and the question we're asking this evening: have small and medium enterprises been getting the support they deserve? Well, the ministry or department would have led us in this conversation this evening, taking us through what they have been doing to deliver on the President's promises. Unfortunately, we've been told Stella Ndabeni-Abrams is new in the portfolio and is not familiar with the issues just yet. The department's Director General has a parliamentary engagement. We have been told they too could not join us this evening. Now, while the invitation, of course, still stands, the conversation can't stop. And here to do exactly that, let's welcome newly elected Business Unity South Africa President, Professor Bonang Mohale. Welcome, sir.
Vuyo, thank you so much for having me, my dear brother.
It's our pleasure. And joining him shortly will be the President of South African United Business Confederation, George Sibulela, as well as Dr. Rosh Mamabolo, who heads the Laura Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Professor Mohale, allow us to kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, and talk first about your election. Congratulations are in order. And what are your marching orders from the Business Unity South Africa membership?
Thank you very much, Vuyo. So first, I think it's to continue to be a trusted advisor, to be a partner of choice, and to do everything possible to make this ANC-led government a capable state. We get our marching orders from the 5th State of the Nation address by the President, when he gave us the four foremost overarching principles. So the first, he said, of course, we needed to defeat the coronavirus pandemic. Number two, we needed to accelerate our economic recovery. Number three, to implement the economic reforms in order to create sustainable jobs so that we can deliver this notion of an inclusive growth. Lastly, he said we needed to defeat state capture so that we can create a capable state. Vuyo?
And from what you have seen so far since he made those promises, has that progress been made?
Look, we are in a spot of bother as a country, as a people with great natural endowments. we are probably at our lowest ebb. We have the unenviable title of being the most unequal society, the now country with the highest unemployment rate, the country with the highest failure of small and medium enterprise. I don't even want to talk about being the most violent society as far as GBV is concerned, all for the wrong reasons. But also at a time when we have just witnessed the 2 weeks in July that gave us all collective trauma as a nation, as a people with great natural endowments, where we saw the intersectionality of a piece around ethno-tribalism. There was also a piece around rampant criminality, but also genuine desperation for our people. Because remember, by the time the pandemic found us, we already faced down, prostate, and absolutely finished, having just put our arms around the 9 wasted years of state capture. We then were in a recession, not the technical recession. As if that's not enough, Moody's joined Fitch and Standard & Poor's and rated us below investment grade, also colloquially referred to as junk. As we speak, we are 3 notches below investment grade, which means borrowing for government, businesses, and you and I has now become more expensive. And of course, the pandemic. As if that's not enough, now we put the 5th layer of looting, where honestly we took the economy of this country back 20 years. And I think at our moment of greatest need, this government demonstrated that it's unable to look after its own citizens. Vuyo?
We are going to talk about those SME failures that you spoke about in a short while. That, in fact, is the point of this evening's conversation. But I just want to continue with a question or two around the bigger issues that you've spoken about and what you'll be championing, or what you've been tasked with by Business Unity South Africa after that election on Monday. Considering that, as you correctly pointed out, we were in a very bad space, we're in bad shape, long before the pandemic hit us. Now, there have been all these conversations going on before we were hit by the pandemic, but also when we were hit by the pandemic. How confident are you, that we are going to be able to find one another as government, business, civil society, organized labor, sooner rather than later, in order for us to, change the situation?
It's interesting that you start with the word confidence at the time when we are witnessing our lowest levels of confidence, trust and hope since the Second World War. At a time when labor, business, government, and civil society are trying to find one another and work together in network. But also at the time when we needed to provide service delivery to our people, and we are woefully inadequate. I think the proof point is the Auditor General's report, but also the Department of Cooperative Governance that says of the 300 odd municipalities, only 7% are functional. 31% are okay. The other 31% are relatively dysfunctional. The last 31% are totally dysfunctional. Therefore, more than 64% of the municipalities are not doing what they are constitutionally mandated to do. But the 2 weeks in July also did exactly that, my dear brother, because it demonstrated beyond any shadow of doubt that here is a South African police service that we deliberately said we wanted to be smaller, 100,000 women and men less, so that we can overspend on intelligence. And what did we do instead of spending on intelligence? We ate the money meant for intelligence. Therefore, not only did we witness monumental intelligence failure, but the entire security cluster was caught napping, where our communities know that when you phone SAPS, they will tell you that we don't have enough cars to respond, we don't have enough bulletproof vests, we don't have enough rubber bullets, we don't have enough tear gas canisters, and in fact we don't have even enough live ammunition. Therefore, how do you send your SAPS with confidence against rampant looting, marauding gangs of thieves? I think that's where we found ourselves. Lastly, I think as business, Vuyo, we are saying, we've been working very closely with government because during the pandemic, we created a business for South Africa. During the pandemic, we said we want to create the Solidarity Fund. And then lastly, we said we want to help with our businesses with the vaccine rollouts. So we wanted to do three things: save lives, as the president said. Number two, preserve livelihoods, because we knew that we're going to kill 10 times more people out of hunger and starvation than the virus would. The one part we didn't emphasize enough is that how do we break the chain between the pandemic cases and deaths? And we can only do that through vaccination. It's only when our people are vaccinated that you can say you're reducing the chances of being infected. When you're infected, the severity is less. You are unlikely to be hospitalized, and in fact, you are unlikely to die. Vuyo, I don't know whether you want to come in here. So those are the...
I do, because anyone who have been listening would have been listening to you over the past couple of minutes. And was to go now, perhaps they had an engagement or something, would be leaving this conversation without a great deal of hope.
That is true. So I think we need to be honest, transparent, and open about our challenges, but also to roll up our sleeves as partners, because together we can achieve more. Our problem, Vuyo, has never been the availability of resources. I think it was General George Patton who said great wars are won by good execution, not by great plans, because good execution will save even a mediocre plan. Our problem has always been in doing. It takes us 14 years to build Medupi. I'm not even talking about Kusile and Ingula. It took us 7 years to build the new multi-product pipeline. Everything we do as South Africans take us inordinately long. The budget, if it's not treble, is quadruple. But at the heart of it, the kernel, the root cause of our problems, we now know that is the internecine strife, the infighting between the ANC, that again have said, for our own fights, to settle our own scores, we are prepared to bend down this country. So we come in at that time with Adrian Gore of Discovery, when we honestly have to reckon with our own winter of discontent, Vuyo. And I think as South Africans, we always go to the precipice. Just before we jump over the cliff, we then pull back. We did that on the 27th of April 1994, and we continuously do that. There is no reason why a country that collects 1.4 trillion South African rands from our South African revenue services should be experiencing the levels of hunger, starvation, and poverty that we are. The unemployment we are experiencing is the one associated with countries at war like Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya, not normal countries that are 27 years into their democracy. We are back to you.
At what point then, so last one, at what point do you and your colleagues at BUSA, and the same, can be asked of all the other business organizations, the same can be asked of all the other players, whether it's organized labor, civil society, and at what point do you then all say, come on now, we've been playing, what we've done up until now hasn't taken us anywhere. It's about time we stop this and treat this as the emergency that it is supposed to be. Otherwise, we should forget about this whole thing and not even have these conversations.
You are absolutely spot on. So let me start first with business. You see, business can't continue thinking that its intent is shareholder maximization. In the 21st century, business needs to be saying, our first job in a pandemic is to survive. Because if you can survive, you'll make money until it comes out of your ears. Number two is to deliver this notion of shared value with other stakeholders, not just shareholders, because what keeps boards awake at night is to ensure that corporate decision-making is consistent not only with the whims of the stakeholders, but the society, the community, and everybody that is likely to have an impact on that business called broader stakeholder community. Number 3, we need to ensure that we do no harm. 4, we need to ensure that we make the world a better place. As government is concerned and its interactions with business, all business wants is regulatory certainty and policy stability. Say the things that you are going to do and then go ahead and do them. What business wants is to say, we want certainty so that we can plan. When you are building a mine, that mine will be there for 50, 70 years. Same way with refineries. We've got 5 of them. The biggest is SAPREF, 180,000 barrels a day. You can't just take it after 5 years and then put it somewhere else. And I think government needs to recognize that. Lastly, Vuyo, I think we need to look at business again and say we need to continue doing well by doing good, because business cannot continue to be an island of prosperity in a sea of poverty. The single biggest systemic risk is youth unemployment. That has gone up from 74.7% to 74.9%. That makes 10 million young people not in employment, education, or training. Unemployment numbers have moved from 11.7 million to 11.9 million. It's almost 12 million people. And only 16 million people were gainfully employed. Net, we have lost 2.2 million jobs. That look after, on average, 5 people. There's another 10 million people. So I mean it when I say we are really in a dire state. Only 30% of children live in a household where there's both a mother and a father. There's 6 million young people who don't know their fathers. No wonder we have the challenges that we have for you. So I think our marching orders moving forward as business, we want to engage, we want to be a partner that's taken seriously, we want to roll our sleeves, because business can deliver mega projects on time, on budget, and in full volume.
Professor Bonang Mohale appointed this week to the position of President of Business Unity South Africa. After the break, we continue with the series we began yesterday, taking stock of the promises President Cyril Ramaphosa made about 6 months ago during his State of the Nation address. With another 6 months or so to go before he makes more promises, we are looking at the progress his administration may have made halfway through their political year. And this evening's focus is on small business. Are they getting the support and attention that they deserve? That's what's coming up in a short while. Don't go away. Have small and medium enterprises been getting the support they deserve? That's one of the questions we are asking this evening as we look back at the promises President Cyril Ramaphosa made in his February State of the Nation address. Let's now welcome the President of the SA Business Confederation, George Sibulela, as well as Dr. Roch Mamabulu, who heads the Laura Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. George Sibulela, looking back at the past 6 months, how do you feel?
Look, it has been a very difficult challenge, I think, for SMEs, as we know. The COVID pressure has been really tremendous to very small businesses. The relief that the government has announced, even though we could understand that the government is under pressure, but however, it has really done little The worst is the recent looting that took place, which resulted in thousands and thousands of businesses closing down. Some of them will never come back again. It has been a dire need for these people to really survive. I think, let me maybe highlight what probably we think is a requirement for small, medium, micro enterprises requires in order to survive. We know, for example, one is they need customers, because if you don't have customers, you can't do this. Secondly, they need capital in order to fund their operations. As you know, they're always under pressure in terms of revenue generations, or let me say, the minimum small working capital that is required in order to run those businesses. And that's the challenge. Thirdly, is they need a very certain economic conditions in the country, and including the policies that exist in that particular country in which they operate. And therefore, that has become much more difficult. And then the last is they require revenue increase in order for them to be able to become credit-worthy with that level of profitability that they can be able to introduce to various funding institutions for them to access capital. And that, on all that I've mentioned, it has been non-existent.
Dr. Ramaphosa, from your vantage point, what are you seeing?
Thanks, Vuyo, for having me. It's been a very difficult journey the past 6 months. But let's be honest, it's been a difficult journey even before COVID came. The unfortunate part with how we operate in South Africa is we are often reactionary to things. We are not intentional in when we plan and when we implement situations. And because we don't do that, we are very susceptible to external forces, whether it's natural disasters or COVID situations. So from my position, as I deal with a lot of entrepreneurs in our research, in our classes, there's been quite a high complaint of a lack of support from government. Mr. Zuluela talks about the relief grants that were promised to entrepreneurs. I'm not so sure that I know for maybe more than 10 entrepreneurs who have received those relief grants. So it's been, the situation is looking more bleak here as we go, and there's no end in sight, because as you and I are having this conversation, there's a new variant that is emerging. So, the light at the end of the tunnel does not look like it's coming anytime soon.
But then, what needs to be done, Dr. Ramaphosa, to address the issue of being intentional, as you say, about what needs to be done? Because you'll recall that last year there were, in fact, towards the end of last year, the president spoke a lot about the SME focused localization policy framework, identified 1,000 products that was supposedly the beginning. On the other hand, the small business development, Department of Small Business Development, as well as the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, were also given a mandate to support small businesses so that they can get access to larger domestic and international market. One would have thought that those things speak to being, as you say, intentional about supporting small businesses. Has that not happened?
Look, I mean, it's a story of our country, isn't it? We have all these amazing plans and amazing goals. And, if it was the Olympic of having plans, we would be gold medalists. But we know that those things are only good on paper. The struggle has always been about implementation. one of the biggest, I mean, I can give you a laundry list of the issues, but one of the biggest issues sitting at the top of that list is the fact that entrepreneurs complain about not being paid on time. So you can have all these policies where you give entrepreneurs all the opportunities they need, but it doesn't help me as an entrepreneur if you give me the opportunity but you don't pay me on time. Because what I then do is I commit my resources, the little limited resources that I have, to a project that you have given me because you're giving me the opportunity. But then you don't pay me on time. And what that does, then it means I don't have any other recourse than to go and seek for debt, for instance, to keep the business running. So it's all these issues. But at the top of it is pay entrepreneurs on time. I mean, one of the biggest challenges also is corruption. I mean, if you look at state capture, for instance, and most of these projects have gone to, and we can't ignore the factional battles within the governing party. It affects society as a whole, entrepreneurs as well, because you have a situation where resources that are meant for a small business in government end up being channeled to a certain faction within the governing party, and that leaves out entrepreneurs to the crumbs of doing catering and doing cleaning and all, but they don't get to have the big projects because those have been channeled to a faction within the governing party. So there's all this list, but at the top of it's just to pay entrepreneurs on time because that's what they seek. The president talks about access to markets, and that's amazing, right? But once you give entrepreneurs those markets, also pay them on time so that they are able to keep the wheels of their business running. And I think that's one of the issues at the top of the list of the things that we need to do.
It's true what Dr. Mamabolo is saying, Mr. Sibulela, isn't it? That perhaps before we can be ambitious about accessing international markets and all these big projects that everyone is talking about, can't we just start with the basics, paying, small businesses on time? And I'm sure, you will have, the report very well that Treasury released recently, which shows, that 8 of the 9 provincial governments were actually not paying, people on time. And only the Western Cape, which ironically, is a province the only province run by another party. The rest of the 8 provinces are run by the governing party that Dr. Mamabolo was talking about. And this is where people are owed billions of rands.
100% correct. I think the doctor is spot on. We have seen the report, very concerning report. In fact, very amazingly so that the city that is supposed to be very sophisticated, which is the Gauteng province, is in fact the largest that is non-paying of SME over, billions of rands. And that is one concern, that why does it take such a long time for officials to be able to realize that this has a direct impact to those SME businesses? And that's a greater concern. And this is where we say, right from the top of leadership downwards, we have already agreed, it was announced in a number of states in the SONA announcement that there is a minimum or a maximum of 30 days for these suppliers to be paid. But sadly so, the planning and evaluation department is supposed to be monitoring those deliverables. And then the real consequences must take place. But unfortunately, that process is not being done. And this is very, very worrying. And this is part of the engagement we will always be engaging with government. But secondly, I need to also highlight that this so-called fruitless expenditure that has been announced on a year-on-year basis of billions and billions of rand, it must stop. We must, as business, require that billions of rands must be accounted as fruitless expenditure. It sounds as if it's a good word for various government, provinces, municipalities to allow this process to sit. And they must realize that fruitless expenditure is unacceptable. It must not continue, because this is the money that is supposed to be spent on SMEs. I think that's very critical for us to really. And then the last thing is, as Professor said, is corrupt activities. The intention of the tender was created really to allow the previously disadvantaged to participate and the SME to participate in procurement processes. But it has now become a process that is being abused in such a way that if you are unknown individual and you tender on the basis of being able to supply goods and services, no matter how credible you are, you would not get those opportunities on the basis that these opportunities are already predetermined to where they're supposed to go. Those are the things that we need to stop, and we hope that in our engagement with government, we can be able to get the law enforcement to really play a critical role in ensuring that those culprits must be arrested and the harsh results must be given to those people.
Dr. Mambabulu, then there was also the 30% procurement policy that was meant to, boost SMEs, ensuring that they are able to not only survive, but grow. Is this working?
Look, again, the targets are commendable. Let's look at that 30%, for instance, and look at maybe just go deeper into that 30% and try and understand who gets what and what out of that 30%, where does what go. You will find that most of the time, 30% that we're talking about, maybe 1% or 2% of that 30% goes to small jobs. Makumalo or Aus Jane, who's providing catering for a meeting in government, for instance. And you find that that's where the bulk, you are giving them those type of projects. There's nothing wrong with that. But then who are you giving the bigger bulk of those projects, right? The bigger projects. Where do those bigger projects go to? And more often you'll find that, your engineering projects, your big projects, you'll find that they go to either, white companies, because they have capacity, and you find that startups might not necessarily have the necessary capacity. But also, you find that if they don't go to white companies, they get to politically connected individuals who then subcontract those projects to white companies because white companies have capacity. And you find that in the whole process, that 30% has not really landed in the bank accounts of SMEs. Right? You have a situation where you'll have a big corporate that can build a bridge, for instance, and it's not it's a white-owned firm. And what they do is then they will subcontract some of the work to black firms. But the subcontracting of that work is you stand on the side of the road waving a red flag showing that there's construction work happening in front of you. It's not the core. So in essence, what I'm getting at is the 30% that we're talking about, the goals that we're talking about, the core of the work does not go to SMEs. The core of the work goes to those who are previously empowered. And I think that's what we need to look at when we go deeper and investigate this number.
George, has that been the experience of your members?
This is a topic I enjoy quite a lot because honestly speaking, it's quite very sad that the people who, in fact, allow this 30% subcontracting that is supposed to be duly geared for capable organization is being approved by the same people who are who are awarding this contract to these mainstream businesses or corporate businesses who win this contract. And I'll tell you the challenge. The challenge is as follows. It becomes also very difficult for that subcontracting business that they have to succumb to the conditions that have been given to that SME on the basis that the quantum of the value of what they even subcontract for is not even profitable enough to make them to build a team of experts to work in that particular project. And therefore, then what happens is you end up taking the cash or becoming a site, passenger on the basis of the commercial benefits are not suitable for you to participate in there. And we have constantly argued that, in fact, it must be turned around, that a black company must be the one awarded the contract, and it must subcontract to a corporate company, because then they control the purse and they control the conditions of the contract. Because even though there was a good intention of saying, this is a big corporate, it will be able to mentor this particular SME, but they don't do that. And sadly so, is because they connive with some of the officials to say, we need the service to be provided. We are not going to be bothered by the conditions of what level of economic interest you get in that particular contract. So I'm not particularly very happy with this 30% subcontracting as it sits today. It needs to be reviewed. It needs to be reviewed on the basis that the client that is issuing the contract must be able to scrutinize and evaluate whether that through 30% of the value has been given to that particular SME, because we want to build industries as opposed to build individuals. That's very key.
Dr. Mambola, recent reports say, after years of growing and growing, small businesses are now declining, and those that have been able to survive are, giving jobs to fewer and fewer people, and that was even before the pandemic actually hit us. Are we to assume that this decline is due to some of the issues that you have mentioned, people not being paid on time, this 30% thing not actually working? Are those the reasons, or the only reasons that we are seeing this decline?
So there's quite a number of issues. One of them would be, for instance, you have a situation where one administration will have a good project. I'll say, for instance, in the city that I come from, in Pretoria, you'll have a program. There used to be this program called SEPO 10,000, which was an initiative of the previous administration. And the idea was to support entrepreneurs and put them into cooperatives and try and support them and give them first preference when it comes to doing business with government. But then what happened subsequently, when that administration lost power and there was a whole shift and change where then there was a new coalition government, and they scrapped it, they did away with that project, and they now wanted to bring their own project. So you have a situation where there's lack of continuity, right, where something that might need to be tweaked here and there for it to work, because there's a new administration that comes in, they do away with the whole initiative. And this is where, people will talk about maybe one of the reasons why China works is because they think in 50 years. So they think in 50 years and they implement and they execute. Here at home, we think in 5 years. I need to, as an administrator, as a mayor, I need to make sure that I succeed the next 5 years. And therefore, we come up with projects that will make us look in the next 5 years, and we don't think beyond the next 5 years. We don't think in 10 years or even in 20 years. And that also is partly why we are constantly having the same issues over and over again, is because we think in short-termism and not necessarily in long-term when it comes to running our administration. But also, the whole political instability within the governing party heavily affects, stable administration and implementation of projects. One of the other things that has pained me quite a lot, is how we approach informal sector in our country. Because if you look at when we talk about, the bulk of the economy is driven by by SMEs or driven by the entrepreneurs, you'll find that mostly it's your street vendors, your hawkers, people who are selling on the side of the street. And what we have not done as a government, we have criminalized the informal sector. So we have assumed that just because a business is informal, therefore it's illegal, right? And therefore we are going to criminalize it. You have situations where Metro Corps will come and confiscate the stock of street vendors and take it into their vans. And time and again, street vendors are being harassed by Metro Corps and their stock has been taken away. And what we don't do is we don't look at the bylaws of saying how can we actually build infrastructure that is going to be conducive for these SMEs, where we are able to put them in a space where there's abolition facilities. I mean, if you go to CBD, for instance, and you have these people who are sitting on the street, where do they relieve themselves, right? There's no abolition facilities there far. So we need to rethink how we approach SMEs. And I think to a large extent, it's a function of where we come from, right? In the apartheid government, small businesses, township businesses were not prioritized. If you go back and you look at Group Areas Act, you look at Small Businesses Act, and you look at all these things, you will realize that they were not meant to assist black people or black entrepreneurs in townships to prosper. Fast forward to today, you kind of think that it's still the same because we have not really changed some of these bylaws. It's only about 4 or 5 years ago when people who used to own these shops that they were running in townships, they only managed to get their title deeds. They've been running these businesses for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. Only now that they're able to get the title deeds to those buildings. So you kind of get a sense that as a government, as a country, we have not shifted in how we approach SMEs. We have not taken them seriously to a point where we are saying these guys can actually drive the economy. When you look at China, for instance, what China works is one can argue that it's a communist government, sure. But what they have done is they have approached business in a free enterprise way, and they understand, they appreciate the importance of having small businesses. We need to start having that mindset shift that says entrepreneurs, informal sector is not illegal, right? They are driving the economy. They are taking a burden away from the government in terms of them relying on social grants for government to look after them. They are saying we'll look after ourselves, but provide us the infrastructure that will make it easier for us to prosper instead of harassing us almost on a daily basis and taking our stock away. And for most of them, it's very difficult for them to come back. Once you take over their stock, that's it, right? And I think those are some of the issues that we need to seriously look at.
In fact, I mean, it would have been one of the things we could have explored with the department, because I know for a fact they have a program called the Township and Rural Enterprises Program, which they work with, I understand, Nedbank on. But of course, I mean, as I said right at the beginning, we did invite them. Then the minister was not available because she's new, and the DG had a commitment that only ends at 9 this evening. But coming back to you, George, I mean, just the pandemic could have only made things worse, and as everyone we've tried to sort of get a sense from has been saying, we don't have the numbers yet or the extent of the problem, but just from what your members are telling you, from the people, what the people in your organization are telling you, what have been their most serious challenges, and how have they been coping, if we were to accept, which is something both of you said right at the beginning, that whatever help has come their way up until now has been woefully inadequate?
Well, just to give you an example, the SME debt relief financing scheme was only about 500 billion. You would imagine how many thousands of SME businesses exist in various townships, even in the developed areas of metropolitan areas. Only out of that 535,000 applications were received. You can imagine the quantum. It's quite a huge number, but sadly so, only 1,497 applications, which were now worth more than 500 million at about approximately 550 million were approved. Now, that tells you that out of 35,000, if it's only 1,000 approved, then you have more than 33,000 that are still have no support. That really is, and this is a typical of our understanding of the magnitude of the elephant we're dealing with in the country. So we would expect at least a minimum of 10 billion to be allocated for that particular industry. I can tell you Soweto alone takes the entire 500 million, just half of Soweto. And therefore, I'm saying there is a number of big criterion that exists. When 200 billion rand loan guarantee scheme was made available for this business, the problem was the same amount of, the same institutions that are creating a huge red tape for these people to be able to access that capital were utilized as distribution channels, which is a quite worrying factor, because if you go to ABSA, you go to NetBank, you go to Standard Bank today, based on what the role they're supposed to play in allocating the funds, the criteria of applications for those small businesses has not changed from pre-COVID-19. It's exactly the same. Because of the distribution channel, they take the application, they utilize it on a similar basis as any other transaction. And hence, only up to 20 to 25% of that money was accessed by the small business. Now, that already tells you the magnitude of the difficulty you have. It doesn't matter how smart you can talk. If you do not have capital to buy stock, to have credit terms, you can't trade. That's unfortunate. You need that minimum key capital that can allow you to trade. So these are some of the challenges that we have to have in Daba of this township business on how, in a practical way, we can deal with making sure that we advance this SMEs. Not to talk about big numbers, but the practicality doesn't happen. I think that's only the worrying factor. And that's what we see all the time, is the announcement becomes very tempting, very interesting, but the implementation becomes different. And I'm saying, for us as business and many other business organizations, we need that in Daba so that we can share the challenges, the practical challenges of how we should do it. And the banks must come to party on the basis that they should change the conditions or the credit terms that are going to be given to those SME organizations. Other than that, we are doomed unless we rely on what the previous Minister of Finance before he left. I thought we will have what we call the state bank by now. Unfortunately, we still don't have.
Okay. Dr. Mamabolo, I'll give you a chance to make some closing remarks in the 30 or so seconds that we still have left. And perhaps in doing that, touch on a subject I know is also very close to your heart, and that is the question of entrepreneurship as, part of the solutions that we should have in addressing our unemployment crisis in the country.
Thanks for you. I think one of the things, as we hash out all these issues, there are some things that government has done right. One of the things that I'm quite happy about is the ease of doing business. When you look at today, you can register a company within 2 days or so. So you can register online, you can register for SARS, you can get a clearance online. So that makes life so much easier for entrepreneurs. I know, for instance, that the minister could not come into the show, but also she was part of a minister at the time when they were issuing the commission on the fourth industrial revolution. The report is out, and there are implications for small businesses. We need to relook at that. In closing, I think one of the solutions, and I'm throwing this out there as an idea, one of the solutions that we need to maybe think about is maybe as part of holding government to account. Because what we have done is we have outsourced the holding of government to account to government themselves. So we often say we have a Department of Monitoring and Evaluation. Why can't we maybe say empower the Auditor General to say the Auditor General, in you doing your annual audit, you also audit the non-compliance of these departments, of municipalities, of provincial departments in not supporting SMEs. And you issue that as part of your audit report. Mm-hmm. And because I believe that the Auditor General still has tools. Most government departments, they are still afraid of the Auditor General, not the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, where we just submit our report and that's where it ends. So in closing, we need to pay entrepreneurs on time. What they need is just being paid on time, and most of these issues will be dealt with. Okay.
Dr. Arosh Mawabulu, thanks very much. He heads the Laura Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We will also thank George Sibulela, who is the president of the SA United Business Confederation. And earlier we had Professor Bonang Mohale, who is the newly elected president of Business Unity South Africa. The former president of the now disbanded Mkhonto Wesizwe Military Veterans Association, KB Maphatswe, has passed on. He served as Deputy Minister for Defense and Military Veterans between 2014 and 2019. Maphatswe was on the program recently, and he reflected on his roles in both the MKMVA and as Deputy Minister of Defense.
Remember, deputy ministers are ceremonial. They don't have powers. They are delegated powers by the minister. So the ministers are the ones that have the powers. So those delegated powers were taken away from me by the minister. And I complained, I wrote to the president that, can you resolve this thing, president? What am I going to do now? Because what I was doing, I was going to the provinces, engaging with the premiers, that there is not only the national government that can deal with the plight of the ex-combatants, including our own comrades who are deployed in government. They are doing nothing in support of ex-combatants.
Also, one of the original members of Mpaqanga Group, the Mahotela Queens, Nobesuthu Mbadu, also passed on today. She joined the Mpaqanga Group in 1964 at the age of 19 and retired in 2017 due to ill health. We now leave you with a short performance by the group, and from all of us on the Watchdog tonight, we say may both their souls rest in peace. Have a good night.